So, and that's really punk rock for me, right? That like I'm not doomed to be my parents, you're not doomed to be your parents. That like at any point, like you can DIY who you are. And I don't know what's more authentic than that, right?
Hello, friends. Welcome to Mostly Harmless. I'm your host, Damn it, Davian. Buddies, this week we're hanging out, we are chatting with my special guest and, part-time therapist, Mr. Phuc Tran. Now, Phuc is a Latin teacher, a tattoo artist, and the author of Sigh, a Misfit's memoir of great books, punk rock, and the fight to fit in. This came out last year. I discovered it thanks to an Instagram ad. I went, what the hell? Threw it in my Libby app on my Kindle, got it for free from my local library, and loved every second of it. The book is the story of Phuc's very real childhood of growing up in small town Carlisle, Pennsylvania in the 70s and 80s, and how he found community thanks to punk rock, and how he found escape through books and reading and learning. It's a fantastic moving memoir about just finding your identity, who you are in life, and figuring out that maybe it's not all planned out for you after all. I think maybe, I don't know. In today's chat, today's a very unusual episode for me at least. Phuc kind of turns the tables around on me and starts asking me a lot of questions. And my initial impulse was to delete all of me out of this. But then we talk a lot about authenticity and identity in today's episode. And I was like, cutting my weirdness out, cutting my awkwardness out, cutting my stuttering out is not me being authentic to you, the viewers. So I left a lot of it in. And oh, buddies, why do I get so nervous interviewing people here on this thing? I don't know, but today's fun. Today we have a real cool chat and a real cool conversation. We talk a lot about identity and authenticity in today's episode, and I get a little deep and a little heavy, and he does kind of like help me out, talking to me about some cool stuff. And buddies, I ramble so much in today's episode. I'm so sorry. I need to stop rambling right now. So let's just get to it. Phuc Tran, author of Sigh. It's out now. You buy an autographed copy from him. Links in the profile right below. Or check it out for free from your library. Right now, my Denver Public Library says it's 6 weeks waiting period. It is worth those 6 weeks. It took me 3 days to read this fantastic novel, and I'm doing it again. I'm rambling. I'm so sorry. Let's go talk to Phuc.
Hey, I'm Phuc. I'm a Latin teacher and a tattooer. This is my shop, and this is my book. It's a book about, well, what the hell is it about? You know what? Let's rewind. Is the book about my family and the sacrifices they made to escape Vietnam? Or is it about growing up in small-town America? Is it about immigration or assimilation? Rebellion or loyalty? Murder or love? I guess it's actually about Star Wars. Or maybe it's about punk rock. Or maybe it's about the books I love that made me who I am. My book is about all those things, but it's about being more than those things. I'm more than just a sum of my parts and experiences. Let's not forget the words of Walt Whitman. I contradict myself. I contain multitudes.
Hey, Damien, how are ya?
Great, thanks. How are you?
Good. Nice shirt.
Oh, thanks. I to be honest, I wasn't trying to impress you.
I'm impressed.
Oh.
I'm ready to rock and roll.
We were actually in my apartment. I would have offered you a beverage.
Yeah, I assume. We'll just pretend that you did.
Yeah, you're just and cheers.
Cheers to you.
So, so I guess we'll get started if you're ready. What are you sipping on, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. It's a Green Spot. It comes out of the Middleton distillery. It's sort of like it's the same distillery that makes like Jameson.
Oh, okay, cool.
And then they have like some other sort of like reserve labels called Green Spot, and then there's a Yellow Spot. But it's good stuff. It's not for mixing. This is a sipping whiskey.
We've been drinking a lot of Hazel Badens around here lately.
Oh yeah.
Hazel Haydens. Did I say that?
Yeah. Basil
I've got a dyslexic brain, so
no worries.
Well, again, it's so great. Thank you for hanging out and chatting with me. For the listener, it's Phuc Tran, right?
Got it. Yeah, I usually say Tran, like
Tran,
rhymes with
okay.
can, but either way, have at it.
I would have figured as a kid of the '80s, you would have went for Tron because But it's
No,
not spelled
and it just I definitely kid of the 80s also resulted in a lot of misspellings. And so I was like, okay, how do I like idiot proof this as much as possible? Because the first name is kind of a, sort of spelling nightmare. So I'm
you
just
know.
gonna go with Tran. Yeah.
Uh, my name, first name is Damien with the
Yeah.
A. Everybody spells it with the E. It upsets more people than it upsets me. The thing that really got me though is I was born in 81. What how old are you?
73. I was born in 73. So
Okay, cool.
yeah,
A little
oldish.
bit older than me. I'll be 40
Yeah.
this year. You're what, 46, 47?
47. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
47. Man,
Yeah.
you look great though.
Thanks. Yeah, it's the
I wouldn't
whiskey.
have
It's
guessed.
like formaldehyde.
Let me ask a strange question. I've noticed,
Yeah,
do you smoke at all?
like cigarettes? No,
Yeah.
I don't. No.
See, like I don't smoke. None of my friends smoke, and we all look like 10 years younger. Anyway, total
No, I
random.
think it's true. Yeah, that's a true story. Yeah, that's science right there.
There was some photo. It was like right before the Super Bowl. It was like a Tom Brady, 40-year-old quarterback, and he looks like a model. And then it was like somebody from the 70s, 40-year-old quarterback, and he looked like something
Beat
my
up.
cat threw up.
Yeah, for sure. Also Photoshop, right?
Oh, yeah. So I was a
Yeah.
kid. I was born in 81. The name Damien in the 80s was tied very closely with the Omen movies. My parents always told me I was named after this Catholic priest, Father Damien, who helped lepers. And then one night my dad was drinking in the backyard and was like, nah, we're going to name you Christopher. Everybody's name is Christopher. The last movie we saw in theaters was The Omen 3, which is the one with Sam Neill as Damien all growing up. And we're like, we thought that would be a weird name. But I wasn't allowed to have friends. There were some friends that weren't allowed to be friends with me because they thought like...
Is your name?
Well, yeah, because they thought my parents were devil worshippers.
Oh my Lord. That's yeah.
But this is during the 80s in, small town Shreveport, Louisiana. So I don't understand what you went through as a kid with your name, but I got some inklings of it in there.
Yeah. I mean, tell me about Shreveport. I'm sorry. I'm so curious about Shreveport. Like, is it big? How big is it?
So Shreveport, Louisiana, it's Shreveport, Bossier City Metroplex. It's like the two neighboring cities bordered by a river. I think it's somewhere around 600,000 people.
Oh yeah.
Third largest city in Shreveport or Louisiana.
Yeah.
It's 30 minutes from the Texas border, 45 from Arkansas.
Okay.
And so it's really like, when I tell people I'm from Louisiana, they are immediately like, ooh, New Orleans. Ooh, we love New Orleans. But Shreveport was more like Dallas Jr. It wanted to be Dallas. Dallas was 30 minutes away. New Orleans was 6 hours away. So it just kind of had a little more of that like East Texas feel about it.
Oh, that's so fascinating. I love that.
Which
yeah. That's amazing. So culturally, you're probably more closely allied or aligned with Texas than you are with like the Cajun French thing.
Yeah. Which one's, I mean, I have a Louisiana tattoo, even though I'm from the North, it's a Tony Sasher's tattoo. So, I mean, I celebrate all of Louisiana, but you are right. I mean, I was actually born in Dallas, but grew up in Shreveport. That's
interesting.
So it's very closely, it's very similar environments.
Yeah.
And what I liked a whole lot about your book is you grew up in Carlisle, Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
What was that town like?
Ooh, yeah. So I think when I think I did some census research, and I think it was like a population around 17,000 people through the 70s and the 80s. So it's about 30 minutes south of Harrisburg, which is the capital. It's like sort of dead center, like if Pennsylvania is like kind of like squarish like that, then Carlisle sort of like south central, right? Yeah. And small, I mean, as far as I could tell, like pretty much like small town America, like, I mean, Philly was 2 hours east, and then Pittsburgh, I think, was like, depending on how you drive, like 4 or 5 hours west of us. I could be wrong about that, but anyway, yeah, small town. Like I think also just in terms of like the census, I think like 90-ish% white, and then like a handful of like Black folks, and then a very small sort of dribble of whoever else is left over in that demographic.
So I grew, I'm 39 years old when I found your book about about growing up as a kid in the, the 80s, so to speak, in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. Here I am, and it reminded me a lot of, I'm a white punk rock kid who grew up in North Louisiana. There weren't a lot of us. There weren't a lot of punk rock kids in Carlisle. So I was really amazed at how much I connected with that book and with your struggles of identity and finding yourself. Oh, that's what it was. I just watched To Kill a Mockingbird the other day. I've seen it before, but I'm going back through and I'm watching all the classics. And there was this quote that I was thinking about this chat with you, and I was thinking this quote came out. And one time Atticus said, "Never really know a man until you stand in his shoes and walk around in them. Just standing on a Boo Radley's porch was enough." And that made me think of you in that book. Like I didn't grow up an Asian refugee in the middle of nowhere, Pennsylvania, but I still found something in that book of yours that that grabbed a hold of me. So thank you.
No,
I guess thank you.
No,
for
thank you.
Shoes to walk around in.
No, I appreciate it. Yeah, no, really, it means a lot. And also like amazing to me to hear from so many kids of all sort of makes and models who were like, I discovered punk rock, like that was really like my salvation. Like it doesn't have to be punk rock, but I still hope that kids today are connecting in some form or fashion and finding their sense of the world through music, right? Like I think it's so powerful, and creating a scene, right? And like developing a scene around that. It seems like with the internet, it's like a lot easier, right? It's almost like too easy, right? It's just like, and like I'm just gonna Google like people who love macrame manga and Slayer, and then like you have like an instant like subreddit for the people who want that.
Well, so I guess we should have gotten into this before, but so my mom's probably going to watch this.
Okay.
What's your elevator pitch on the book? Like, how do we pitch this to like somebody who's not necessarily into punk rock or whatnot? How do you sell this to those people?
I mean, I think I think I'll say this, like, and I don't mean to be dismissive. Like, I think if like punk rock is a thing that will turn you off, then that's okay too, right? Like, I didn't, I think the elevator pitch is like it's a coming like sort of classic coming of age story about like a Vietnamese refugee kid who, was growing up in small town PA as like the only Vietnamese kid, and he discovers great books and punk rock to sort of make his way through high school, right? Especially, and there's like dysfunction and abuse at home and like rednecks and bullies at school, and how does he find his place in the world? And he finds these two things that we would think are really polar opposites, but they're the communities that he finds. Yeah.
Nice. So Cliff's Notes, just further
Sure.
to just further sell the book, because like I liked this book so much. That's why I wanted you on here today.
Oh, thanks.
Hopefully,
how is that? Wait, how is that elevator pitch? Does that sound good to you? I don't know.
No, it sounds real good. Because it's a coming of age story. It's about finding identity. I think anybody like I'm watching all the top 100 movies of the AFI.
Oh, well, that's so awesome. Yeah. Are you doing it in any particular order?
Just kind of whatever strikes my fancy.
Oh, I love that.
Last night we were watching a repeat of Modern Family. They were talking about Streetcar Named Desire. So the girlfriend went to bed. I turned on Streetcar. Today I followed it up with Sunset Boulevard because it just seemed like a real good.
Oh, nice. I've never seen Sunset Boulevard.
It's one of my favorites.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen it before, but it just felt right watching those two back to back. They really are kind of about descents into madness and kind of what the world put these people through.
Yeah.
But what I like watching these movies is there is a sense of like people trying to find themselves and trying to find out who they are, and that makes important stories that I think that Americans just love. So I'm hoping that somebody listens to my rambling and goes, you know what, that other guy sounded really good. I'm gonna go buy it.
Thanks. That's fine. Yeah.
So who are the guys? Who are the guys that got you into punk rock? How did you find this magical subgenre?
Yeah.
Especially because I imagine in my days, I got lucky. I got lucky and heard like Green Day on the radio, Offspring, Goldfinger. I was pre Blink-182, but just barely. So how did you discover
on the radio? Like top 40, right? I guess that was like when like punk really broke, right? Like Green Day, like Dookie was like that was
Right.
like charting on Billboard. Yeah,
Like
yeah, yeah,
I
yeah.
I loved Dookie, but it wasn't until a couple years later when I got into stuff like Screeching Weasel and
Mm,
Rancid and stuff like that that it really took off for me. But I was just
yeah,
curious, how did you find this subgenre?
yeah. I mean, it was like, like I just like dumb luck, really. Like I just happened to buy like a used skateboard from my across the street neighbor, and like we had just moved to the neighborhood, and he was like 3 years older than me, so he was like in 10th grade, and I was just about to go into 8th grade, or yeah, and he had like this like classic like Vision Gator deck, and I didn't know. He was like selling me whatever he could just for money for weed, but which I didn't know at the time. I was like, oh sweet, I'll buy this like deck for $10, and then I showed up at school, and some kids were like, hey, like you got a cool skateboard, like assuming that like I knew what I was doing, and like and so they just invited me to go skate with them, and like that was like I remember very clearly the first time I heard, like punk rock, and it was like like there was like swearing, like a lot of swearing, and I was like,
Yeah.
you can say fuck on a record? Like what's going on? Like, and that was kind of it. Yeah, and it was kind of a little bit all over the place. Like that was like 86, 87, or like 86. So, like, it was like Minor Threat, and like well they or like and like the Fugazi EP was just about to come out, and it was like definitely like like, and it was like a funny mix of like Brit punk, like like the Clash and the Sex Pistols, and sort of like Stiff Little Fingers, were like really like popular in my friend group, and then sort of like the American stuff. But it was also like like I feel like I forget this, like it's expensive to like buy records and to buy even cassettes, right? So it's like one person would buy a record, and then they would like dub it, on a cassette for like everybody in the crew.
So
Oh,
in
Misfits. I should name also Misfits. I mean, the
oh, sure,
Misfits were
yeah.
like, yeah, really huge, like in like 86, 87. And then like I got like Thrasher. Like I remember like getting like Thrasher magazine, which
Yeah.
is like sort of like this kind of great compendium of like skate culture, right? And like that was like the point at which I think like skateboard culture and like punk rock culture were merging together, right? So like they would have like a profile of like the Descendants or All, or Dag Nasty, and then it would be like, here's how you do an ollie or like a nose grind or whatever. Like so, yeah.
I remember less. I was a BMX kid instead of a
Mm,
skate kid, but
mm.
still there were times when I'd buy the Thrashers, and I just remember the ads for all the band t-shirts, and I remember that's how I discovered Fugazi. I was like, what is this shirt that says this is not a Fugazi shirt?
Yeah, yeah,
Like because I didn't get it, but it made me want to. Man, I hadn't thought about that in a long time.
yeah.
Yeah, that was cool. Okay, yeah. Um, so coming, so you're a Vietnamese refugee. How old were you when you landed in Pennsylvania?
Like just not even yet two, like 1.5.
Okay, great. So
Yeah.
so you essentially like you speak both languages, I assume.
I mean, I would say like now at this point, like my Vietnamese is probably like what I would call kitchen Vietnamese.
Sure.
Like I never like became like sort of fully literate. Like I speak with my parents in Vietnamese, and my father actually prefers to speak in English just because he likes practicing his English.
Yeah.
But like I wouldn't, if you drop me in Vietnam, like I wouldn't die or starve. Like I could get like a hotel room and like rent a cab and all that
Nice.
stuff. But like I couldn't talk like about the like economy
Sure.
or like GameStop or Reddit or whatever with you in Vietnamese. Yeah.
That's fair. Do you dream
Yeah.
in it? Do you dream
No,
in Vietnamese and all?
no,
Yeah,
no,
it's-
no, no, no. Yeah.
one of my friends, she's an immigrant from Mexico City, and she occasionally, I've asked her that before, and she's like, every so often, she says usually it's a nightmare when it'll sit in because she's stressed out and doesn't know where she is, and that's when that other language pops in. So anyway, just curious.
Yeah, yeah, and I just think it's also sort of like whatever your like general, for me, I guess, is like whatever my like the habitat is. Like I think that really dictates like what my dream cycles are like. I only say this because when I did like a German immersion program, and I studied abroad in Germany, and when I was there, like I definitely remember dreaming in German, and like when the switch was flipped, I was like, oh, okay, like I'm speaking German now, and like I'm dreaming in German, and it's like super weird. Yeah.
Uh, so before I do an interview, I'll often dream about the interview subject or whatnot because it's all consuming. When you were writing this book, did you have any like flashback memories to Phuc as a child?
Yeah, yeah, a lot. I mean, I don't know if I had dreams, but like I would, or things would come to me as I was writing. Like I would just remember it, because it's sort of like if you're not using it, use it or lose it, right? So, I mean, these are just like memories and like sort of images of things that I hadn't thought about in a long, long time. Yeah, and then also just like chatting with my brother and my parents just to sort of like corroborate or fact check things, and it's pretty funny. Yeah.
I've started writing more this year in the pandemic. Your book was a huge influence on me as well for that. How does one sit down and actually write a memoir that's true to themselves?
Wow. I mean, I think, there's for me, like I think there were two like and I think it's different for everybody, right? Like
Sure.
I think that question is it's a great question. I think it's also a tricky one. It's sort of like asking like what is the best chess move, right? And it's
Yeah.
kind of like, depends on your board, right? Depends on what all the pieces in play are. Like for me, like my guiding principles were there's a great line from E.B. White's style Elements of Style, and he says, you're writing for an audience of one at the end of the day, right? That like if I'm not writing for myself, like write the things that make me laugh and write the things that make me cry and the things that are like going to make me cringe, then at the end of the day the book is not going to be a success because it wasn't authentic to who I was, right? So I think that was really powerful for me, like as a sort of like a guiding star. And then the other one was I taped it onto my writing notebook was the thing that you're most afraid to write that. Because like I think when you read writers and you feel like they're not taking risks and they're not sort of like letting it all hang out or they're not swinging for the fences, like like I don't want to invest my time and energy into reading something that someone is just trying to write, and it feels anemic and there's like no blood in the water anyway. So those for me, like that was super helpful.
Well, it's you want to be authentic, and that's
Sure.
isn't that what punk rock to an extent was all about back in the day?
Yeah, absolutely.
Like I can't if I hear even a hint of something that's not necessarily authentic in something, it turns me off completely. So
wait, let's talk about this. I love this, and I haven't had the chance to sort of talk to anyone else about this
okay,
in
yeah,
a podcast form. Like, what do you think? What do you think that is in like? What does it mean? And I'm not asking this in an antagonistic way. I'm really this is like deep inquiry for me. Like, what does it mean to be authentic? Like in either writing or punk rock, let's say. Like, I'm so curious about that.
I don't. It's weird. I read Catcher in the Rye later in life. It didn't have as much effect on me reading it in my 30s as it probably would have had I read it in my teens. But as far as authenticity, it's just kind of like I want something. The world is full of so much plastic and so much fakery that it is somehow. I don't want that. I want something that's real and raw and unfocused. And maybe that's because I feel real, raw, and unfocused at times as well. So it's maybe just a mirror for me to look through as well.
Yeah.
I don't know. What about for you?
I think I've been thinking about this a lot, right? Like, so like when I was in high school, like, like the, like a good analogy or a close, corollary to inauthenticity was the sort of like the fake kids, right? Like the fake punks. There was like this one kid who was just like like for whatever reason, like my group of friends decided that this kid was like a poser and like they just like heckled him and bullied him mercilessly. And I was like, but what like makes him a poser? Like, I mean, as far as I can tell, like, and even if all you did was want to be a skater, right? Like somehow that felt like it was like the wannabe wasn't good enough. So I struggle with it, and I think it's something that I struggle with in the book as well. Is this idea of and I think it's a worthy I think it's a worthy struggle because I think this idea of like what makes an authentic punk rocker, right? Like like I don't know, like it's not for popularity's sake. Like none of the punks were popular, so it's like you're not doing it for social cachet, right? But even if you were, like, I think that could be up for debate whether that makes you authentic.
Yeah, no, it's man, and that poser thing. I graduated high school in '99. That was still very much a thing until pretty much until bands like Blink 182 and like of course that set upon its own like fake punk rock thing. But really, I think the gatekeepers of punk rock kind of went away in the 2000s.
Oh, is that right? Oh, that's good. Interesting.
And this is just me talking from my experience.
Yeah.
The kids, I'm in Denver these days, and the kids in Denver are so much more open and so much, everything's all about being inclusive and educating people. So you can have that kid. One of my best friends in high school was the kid who would literally go to the mall and carry a skateboard, even though he didn't know how to do it, just so he would look, because he wanted to play that part. Man, and sitting here talking to you about it, I'm like, maybe life would have been a whole lot different if, instead of us being like poser, we just brought these people in and taught them instead.
Sure. Yeah.
I spent years wanting to do things and make things, and I just was like afraid to do it because I was afraid of, oh shit, man,
getting called out, right?
Yeah, this is a great therapy session. Thank you.
Well, and I think that really, like, for me, like, these questions all circle the drain because, like, of getting called out for not being a real American, whatever that means, right? Like, and I think in the national discourse, like, we're having this conversation about who's a real American. Like, even with the insurrection, right? Like, it's like, we're the real patriots. Like, we're taking the country back, and it's like, wait. No. Who who's deciding who's a real American, right? And like using the label of patriot to be like, I'm a real American and you're not, right? It's wild, right? So the idea of authenticity is like really interesting to me. I just to me, like, I had this other conversation and someone was like, you are, like, it was a conversation about like who or what is an authentic Vietnamese person, and I was like, what does that even mean? Because like you said, like, then all of a sudden you're like, well, then there's gatekeeping. There's like some sort of like cabal of people who decide like you are really Vietnamese and you are not, like you speak the language and you do not, and all this stuff. And I think for me, like, it's been there like my whole life. Like, and also, like, I love that punk rock is a little bit like a middle finger to all of that, right? And it's just like, well, if you don't like it, well, fuck you guys, and I don't care. Like, I think Black Flag is really incredible in that way. Like, they really, and Henry Rollins in particular, like, he grew his hair out long, right? Because all the punks were like, you fucking hippie, and he's like, well, okay, fine, like, I'm gonna grow my hair out and then, like, beat the shit out of you after shows. So I mean, not that that's good for everybody, but yeah. So I don't know.
We wanted to do this thing about 15 years ago, and I was living in Colorado Springs at the time, and everybody was wearing like girl pants and really tight clothes. But I'm a heavy dude, so I would never go for that. And Walmart at the time had these like NASCAR jackets you get for like $20. We had this idea of being NASCAR, like hardcore guys wearing NASCAR jackets. And the closest we got is we all had these Target brand Shaquille O'Neal Adidas jackets that we all of us bought for like $5 each on clearance and wore around. But man, I haven't thought about a lot of this stuff in a long time.
That's amazing. That's really amazing.
Yeah, but again, that was our way of being like, you guys are being like gatekeepers over here. Well, fuck your gate. We're gonna go wear like the most ridiculous shit we can. And it was still like authentic in a way. I don't know. It's weird. Authenticity is such an interesting thing. And
yeah. So here's my last thought, and we can move on. But I think the idea of authenticity, like, I think really enters the conversation because of capitalism, right? Because like in an exchange of goods, right? Like, that's how you determine whether the thing that you got was of value or not. And so like that's when, like, oh, is this like a real, Gucci, or is this like fake Gucci, right? Is this like authentic leather, or is it like, pleather? And I think in our culture in particular, where I think you can very easily buy identity through the things that you wear and the music you listen to and that stuff. Like, I think that inevitably, like, if you can buy the real thing or accidentally buy the fake thing, like, you can eventually be the real person or be a fake person, whatever that means, right? So I think it's like this like weird bleed over from sort of like capitalism and the way that we talk about goods. But that's just like sort of my armchair. My caveat is like, I'm just a tattooer. I'm just a middle-aged punk rock guy. But I think that idea of authenticity, I think, starts with like commerce, right? Because I don't know, like, I don't think it starts in like any kind of a communal based thing, right? Like, I don't think like the pilgrims were like, you're not really a pilgrim, just get out of here, or like, you're not, it's just very strange.
Man, you've given me a lot to think about today when it comes to authenticity.
I mean, I really love thinking about it.
I do too. It reminds me of those late night conversations me and my friends would have at like Village Inn at 1 o'clock in the morning, down in coffee. You know, like, is that color blue the same color blue that you see? Like, I like those kind of, you know, stoner.
Yeah.
Not that this is stoner, but
No. I hear that.
That deep, like late night conversations that you can only have with like the best friends forever.
Well, thanks. And also, I think like I think the idea, I think like what that conversation around authenticity, I think is really can be tricky, or the thing that is problematic with it is that, like, we're expecting everyone to be a finished product, that like we can't be messy, that we can't have like false starts, right? And like, and like maybe we think we want this one thing and all of a sudden we like turn around. You know what? And also I think now it's really deeply amplified by like the public discourse around politics, where like people like will dig up old tweets from like 20 years ago and be like, well, you tweeted this, in 2000, so therefore you're a hypocrite and you're fake, right? Like you're fake, you're a liar, because I can't believe what you say, as opposed to being like, hey, you know what, I said like some dumbass shit like 20 years ago and I've grown as a person.
I feel that all the time because I grew up in Louisiana. I did not realize I was a racist person until like I didn't think I was racist. But when you start looking upon things with this different lens of how things are described, when you just look at things differently, it's like, oh yeah, there was a lot of ingrained racism within me. Does that make me a bad person now because I've grown and can recognize them and teach other people not? So yeah, totally. I think about this kind of stuff all the time, way too much. So
yeah, no, that's awesome. I think it's a sign of like, a life of inquiry, right?
Yeah. Well, in particular, I just finished reading Isabel Wilkinson's book.
Yeah, Caste.
I didn't read Caste. I read
you read
Warmth of Other Suns, her first novel, which was all about the migration of colored people out of the South and just all these ideas that had been ingrained in me since birth. And it's just like, oh no, it was all advertising. It was all just people trying to sell you this idea and all of us buying into it. So your ideas on authenticity, I'm going to have to relook. You're going to have me staying up late tonight.
Sorry, thanks.
No apologies.
I'm just asking questions. I don't have any answers.
No, it's great. I mean, who does? That's why we're sitting here talking. If I had the answers, I wouldn't be talking to you. I need to find them myself. But so you mentioned, of course, you are, I hate to keep saying the word refugee, but you came to the United States seeking, your parents did at least, seeking safe haven from Vietnam. And to see the shit that's going on right now in this country, like all you've known, I take it, is America. You are American, but what is your experience like right now in this world? What do you? How are things different from you? I don't know quite how to say the words.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, I think it's in some ways it's like it's better, in some ways it's worse, right? Like I remember like when Charlottesville happened, my brother and I were texting, and he's like, "Are we seriously still trying to punch Nazis?" Like he's like, "I can't believe like we're still doing this like 20 years later." And I was like, I don't, so like I think it's disappointing that like there hasn't been like a deep reckoning on a larger scale, with racism, just and all of that. And at the same time, I think the fact that we're having a public discourse is really powerful. Like growing up in the 70s and 80s, like nobody talked about this in a public way. And that there's so many white people declaring like very strongly their allyship, with Black Lives Matter or any number of other sort of like socially forward or socially progressive movements. So that's really heartening to me. Because like when I was growing up, it was just like sort of like it wasn't like that. Like kids weren't sort of like putting themselves out there and taking up all these causes like in such a public way, and certainly not adults. So I don't, I mean, James Baldwin says, right, like you you can't fix anything that you're not talking about. Even though like you could talk about it and not be able to fix it, but you definitely can't fix it if you're not talking about it. So yeah, it's
Cool.
yeah.
Yeah. What is it like putting out a book that's very much about your experience growing up in America at this time? Like you couldn't have. It's weird to say you couldn't have planned a better time to put this out there, but man, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah, and the book was like a 4-year process. Like
yeah,
we literally, it was 2019, and I finished the book in 2019 and like had this meeting with like the publicity and marketing team, and they're just, and they're very savvy about like when they think a book will be most impactful in terms of launch. So they're like, let's pick April of 2020. It'll be like the anniversary of the fall of Saigon, and maybe we can get some, sort of catch some waves off of that sort of historical tide. And I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds fine. And haha, pandemic, right? Like you never know what's going to happen. So yeah, I mean, I can't, that's just dumb luck, but I'm excited, like I feel very fortunate that people are finding the book and the story resonant. Like, and yet like it doesn't feel like an artifact from the 80s. Like it feels still incredibly relevant today. So I'm sure people are like, oh, that's depressing. But at the same time, like, I guess we still got work to do.
yeah. And you have two children of your own?
Yeah, yeah, yep. 7 and 10.
7 to 10 little girls?
Yep, 2 girls. Yeah,
Two girls, man.
yeah.
So when you're looking back at this life that you've lived, you're a father, how does that change your relationship with your parents as you're writing this book? Man, how does that work?
Yeah. I think I really and I unlike for me, like the big breakthroughs were like, sort of just like finally getting like counseling and like, taking care of my mental health and like going to therapy for like, a good chunk of my 30s before I had kids. Or like right as I was having my first daughter. And like that was really important. Like you can only like, you know, listen to like super aggressive music and get in a pit and like punch people in the face, right? To like get out your aggressions. But like
Yeah.
that's not really about like self-healing, you know what I mean? Like that's just like the pressure valve needing like release. So I think like the counseling was like huge for me. And then, writing the book obviously was really powerful in reframing, sort of like my parents and their humanity, because I think that is a natural blind spot for all kids, right? Like you, like like it's hard to see your parents in any kind of like a three-dimensional way, right? And so, they end up being sort of like two-dimensional villains or heroes, right, in your life, right? Like
Right.
when you're really little, it's like, oh, your parents, like they can do no wrong, and then as you get older, it's like they can do no right, and then once you're an adult, you're like, well, the truth is somewhere in the middle, right? So for me, it was really powerful in writing the book and being a parent myself to sort of fully see how flawed, but also how valiant they were. Yeah.
Nice. And I forgive me, I can't remember. Are your
Oh, please.
parents still alive?
Oh yeah. Yeah. They live in Southern California.
Oh, no, very nice. They've upgraded
Yeah,
a
yeah.
lot from
Oh yeah, big
Pennsylvania.
time, big time. Yeah.
What do they think of this book and what's become of their son?
I think, um, I mean, I think like as like the black sheep in the family, like the bar has always been like kind of low for me, so which I really appreciate. They're just like, I mean, I remember like going to college and there was like no pressure for me to be like a doctor, lawyer, or engineer, unlike anybody else in my family, because they're like, well, he's not on drugs, he's not homeless, like he's in college, good enough. So I was like, yes. My mother is, sort of functionally illiterate in English, so she has not read the book as far as I know. My father read it maybe like 6 or 7 months after it came out. And like our text exchange was literally like it was like on a different family text thread. And I was like, hey, have you guys read the book? I'm just curious, like most parents, if like their kid does a thing, they'll be like, hey, like I saw your movie or heard your album and I liked it or not, whatever. But like it was like sort of like nothing from my parents for like 7 months after the book came out. And finally I was like, I'm just curious. You don't have to read it. I'm not going to make you read it, but like, did you read the book? And then my dad texted me back. He's like, yes, I did. It was very painful. And then that was it. I
Yeah,
mean,
I mean,
yeah, for sure. Like, how could it not be painful, right? I mean,
yeah.
it's like warts and all. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting because I don't want to get into it, but I found out some interesting stuff about my parents this year, and it's you spend a lot of time just like I contemplating who they were, what decisions they made, and it makes them a little bit more human, and
Mm.
I kind of respect some of their journey a little bit more now. How do I tell them that? I just hope they watch this
Yeah.
in those
Well,
awkward
wait.
conversations.
Now I'm so. Wait, can
Okay.
you talk about it, or would you rather not talk about it? That seems real juicy. I kind
Well,
of.
I'll tell you that like the Cliffs notes is
Yeah,
that
yeah. Only if you want to. I don't want to put you on
oh
the
I
spot.
don't mind. I'm just worried about like the listeners um who watches this, because in the past I've gotten these iTunes comments. It's like the host never stops talking. Let the people you're interviewing talking, but I'm like, haven't you guys ever listened to Mark Maron? All he does is talk about himself and he gets great stuff
That's
out of his
funny.
people. But anyway,
Oh, that's funny.
no, so around I haven't talked to my father in a long time, because whenever I do talk to my father, it's very like, well, my life's terrible. Like he talks to the phone like this, like, my life's terrible, and I'm still, and then it'll usually be some racist remarks thrown in there. Just, this last time I talked to him, he was like, "You're not dating a colored woman, are you?" And I'm like, "Who cares if
Whoa.
I was?"
Oh my God. You're like,
So,
yes, two
needless,
of them.
right? Needless to say, I don't talk to my father that much, but it turns out that my mother got pregnant at 17 and married her friend, who was my father, who was not my sperm donor. And
Whoa.
I just found that out this summer at 39 when I called my father on
Oh
Father's
shit.
Day. On Father's Day, my father's like, "Well, I just figured you finally heard the news and didn't want anything to do with me." And it's just like I didn't believe him. I was like, "Oh, you're crazy." My father has some mental illness, and which I thought he passed on to me, which maybe he did, but that not genetically, it turns out.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so it's been a real interesting summer, just thinking about what makes a person, who is a person, how
Yeah.
does all this stuff
Who's your
happen.
authentic father, right?
Right, exactly. And
Yeah.
like I have a bad temper, but when I have that bad temper, my father's in the room with me, spiritually, not this sperm donor who I don't know. And then I went
Yeah.
and signed up on ancestry.com, and it turns out, oh, my father was telling the truth. And real interesting. It's been an interesting like
Wow.
summer to think about these things.
Yeah.
And so it
Holy
makes me think a
cow.
lot about like culture and nature versus nurture and stuff like
Yeah.
that. So
Yeah.
reading a book like yours, where it just because I want to turn it back into you, it really does. It's like, okay, they're like you there's there I'm rambling too much, but there's
No.
something in inherently like connecting about this subgenre of music that we all found in our stories. And it was
Yeah.
really wonderful though to read your book and just be like somebody who's completely different time zone, completely different world than me, has such a similar story. It really did make me feel
Mm.
not as much alone in the world, even though
Oh,
again, I'm
thanks. I appreciate
39
that.
years old and you're writing about yourself at, you know, 15, 16. But
Yeah.
it's those that mirror that we can look at.
Yeah. Well, and I think that part of it, I hope, is this idea that like we're not, and I think it loops back to this like sort of like the punk rock ethos of like DIY, right? Like the ultimate like sort of like personal punk rock DIY thing is when you're 15 or 16 to be like, I reject who my parents are because like their morality, their ethics, their politics, whatever, don't line up with mine. I mean, for me, it was like, the Reagan era stuff,
Yeah.
right? And to feel like you're like where you're coming from doesn't determine where you can go. Like for me, that was so powerful because like as a kid who was not from this country, wasn't born here, parents like can, don't speak the language well, like if our past determines our future, well, then why try anything, right? Like, what are we what are we saying to like all the Black Americans, the 13%, people who are Black and are descended from slaves, that like that
Right.
somehow that ancestry determines their future? Absolutely not. Like I reject that like wholeheartedly. Um, and also, right, like the flip side is that then all the people who are like well-heeled and hoity-toity and the one percenters, like, is that their heritage as well? No, you got to work for that shit all the time. So and that's really punk rock for me, right? That like I'm not doomed to be my parents, you're not doomed to be your parents. That like at any point, like you can DIY who you are. And I don't know what's more authentic than that, right?
Yeah. That's beautiful. I'm
Thanks.
going to ask you more questions, but that's a
Sure,
perfect
let's do
stopping, that's a perfect stopping point.
Yeah.
But let's just keep going. So I'm fascinated because me and my partner have decided not to have kids. Me, because I do suffer from some depression issues, and I don't want to pass those on to anyone else.
Sure.
And then she's got her own reasons. I won't speak for her, but you've had two kids. You had maybe not the easiest time growing up. How scary was it for you to have these kids, and where did you find the strength to like make these lives?
Yeah, it was super scary. And in fact, for a long time, so like when my wife and I first got together, we're like, oh, we're totally gonna have kids. And all of a sudden we're like, oh fuck, no kids. And then so we were like, no kids for a long time. And then all of a sudden we're like, you know what? I don't like, let's have kids. Like, yeah, it was scary and it did take a lot. I also thought selfishly, like I think, I was very close to my grandparents and I just thought like about their story and I thought like I just wanted somebody like genetically for whatever that's worth. Like I wanted someone to carry on that story and have that my family story be part of their story as well. Right. It's selfish and it's not great for the planet and all that stuff. Like I recognize that, but and it's inherently, sort of illogical, right? Irrational. But yeah, it was really just about like passing on the story. In a real way, I guess.
How are you actively working to make the world a better place for your kids, I guess? Kind of where I'm going.
Yeah.
I was trying to find a more elegant way to say it, a smarter way, but like how do you,
Yeah, I mean, I think like I think my I feel like I have a pretty clear sense of agency and like where my sort of locus of control lies, right? Like, I can't fix greenhouse gases and institutional racism and all that stuff. Like I think I can make sure that like my kids are happy and they grow up feeling loved and unconditionally. Obviously I'm not like definitely not a perfect parent, but if I can do even just a little bit better than my parents did, because I'm not struggling with PTSD and language things too. Like I'm not saying that like my parents are bad parents, end of statement, but I can also attribute like all the struggles that they had to, coming here with, $60 and like, a newborn child and all that stuff. I mean, it sounds, and not speaking the language, like I can't imagine what they went through. It's so horrendous. So yeah, and just making sure that they grow up with a sense of, I can't make the world a better place for them, but I can make them better people in the world. And frankly, like if I can do even that a little bit, like I think that seems like a win to me. Yeah.
I have this idea, because I'm going to put this on YouTube. We're going to put this on the podcasts.
Yeah.
Well, I have this idea that maybe it may not be next week and maybe 2 years, 5 years, somebody might come across this time capsule of this interview and they're looking, they're somebody who's looking for help finding their identities. Like, do you have any, and also not to mention that you have been a teacher in the past, like, what advice do you have for people that are looking for help finding their identities?
I mean, I think it's hard. Like I want to acknowledge that. I think that it's really like a process, that it's a lifelong process for many of us, and that it's okay to be confused. And that like I think the most important thing is to find a community, like in a place where you belong. Like that. So like in the subtitle of my book, right? It's like a Misfit's memoir of great books, punk rock, and the fight to fit in. And the idea of fitting in that is in the subtitle, it's a red herring, because it's really, it's a fool's errand to try and fit in, because like the idea of fitting in means like, what do I have to change about myself to get other people to like me, right? Which is like, that's conformity, and that's homogeneity, and the opposite of fitting in, to borrow the famous words of Brene Brown, is the opposite of fitting in is belonging, right? So I think like that is so important, is to find a community and a sense of belonging somewhere. And that really means like finding a group of people. They may be your family, they may very well not be, like a group of people who make you feel seen, and they make you feel understood, and they make you feel valued. Like if you can find a group of people like that, where you can feel seen, valued, and understood, like you'll find your sense of self, I think, more readily than if you didn't have that support from the community.
Yeah. If the technology to like quantum leap backwards into your younger self, is there anything that you would do different?
No, not at all.
No, good.
No. Yeah. I might be a little kinder to some people, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, I say that too quickly, but I wouldn't change any of the events, but but if I could have been like a little bit nicer to my brother, like I was such a dick to my brother,
Me
but
too.
like it was, yeah, but it's sort of like that anger, right? It's like, it's a trickle down economy. It's like, okay, like my dad's mad at me and he's going to beat the shit out of me. Well, I'm just going to be mad at my brother and like beat the shit out of him. And
that's exactly me and my brother. Are you guys close now?
Yeah, very much so.
Oh, I need to ask you for some advice on that then.
yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Me and my brother are not as close as I would like us to be, but that's okay. But how did you and your brother get closer over the years? Just
I mean, I think, gosh, I mean, we lived in the same city at the same time together. And I think, just like and then for a while, like we were just like, hey, listen, we're not going to get closer if we don't talk, right? Like
Okay.
nobody's been like, wow, I really feel close to you because we haven't talked in 6 months. So for a long time, my brother and I had a standing weekly like phone date. Like we're just like, I don't care like if you have nothing to say or something to say, but like let's just get on the phone for like 20 minutes, like required. And we did that for a couple of years, and that was really great. And we don't do, but now we're texting all the time. And this was like pre-cell phone, so we actually had to like get on a phone and like dial the number and stuff.
Yeah, me and my brother have a hard time talking, and it's just from all that stuff growing up.
Yeah.
But I was in Florida a few years back, and he lives in Florida. He drove 2 hours to come see me and do whatever he was doing on his cell phone the whole time. So I mean, he drove the 2 hours, 4-hour round trip. So that means something.
Yeah, definitely. Is he aware that you wish that you guys were closer?
Yeah, I've definitely sent him those. Maybe I should send him some sober texts that say that, and not the 1 a.m. Drunken ones. But I do think, and I hope he does know that. I don't think he'll watch this, but maybe I will. Maybe I'll make a little bit better of an effort, because for me growing up, it was very much the same thing. Like we both got picked on at home, we both got picked on at school, and I turned around and picked on him. And once I figured out that was a cycle that we were all just living in, it made it easier to break. And so self-analysis has been very helpful for some of those.
Yeah, for sure. And he also might not be in a place to be close, right? And that, which is painful for you, I'm sure, but it also is what it is, right? Yeah. It's a lot of moving pieces there, it sounds like.
That's fun.
Yeah.
But back to the book, just because I just want to help you sell more copies.
Oh, thanks, Damien.
So what have been some of the more surprising reactions to this book?
Gosh, I mean,
let me just because like I know for a bigger book like this, the publisher is going to send out those Goodreads copies to try to get people to post those reviews. So some gray-haired little granny might be getting this for free, and like I don't know anything. Have you experienced any of that? Like people like totally out of the wheelhouse, just falling head over heels for your book?
Yeah, for sure. Like I've definitely the people, like I mean, I don't want to say like I wrote this book with like zero fucks to give, but like I kind of like, I just was like, I'm going to write the book that I want to write. And if people love, it's sort of like making like food, and it's like I'm gonna spice it for me, and if it's too spicy for you, like it's not a character flaw, but it's spicy, and so I'm just like constantly amazed. Like I got this like amazing email from like a reader, and and he was just like, like I'm just like a middle-aged gay Mormon in Utah, and like I loved your book and I connected with it so deeply, and there's really no, very much what like your preamble is like. There's just no reason why I would connect so deeply to like a Vietnamese refugee growing up in like rural PA, and I was like, that's really powerful. And also hearing this was actually really powerful too, Damien, was like hearing from kids that I went to high school with who I thought just had it made, and like, like their life was just like, hospital corners and everything was perfect. And like these kids were like, actually, like my dad was an alcoholic and he beat the shit out of me and I had to like live with my grandparents. And I was like, God, like it just really reinforced for me how little we know about each other's stories, and worse, how much we assume that we know about each other's stories. And yeah, that was incredible to learn about. And then like hearing from like kids who were closeted the whole time through high school. I mean, I didn't know any kids who were out, who were like gay in high school. Like, I mean, they just wouldn't have survived. I mean, my high school, it was like, the 80s, it was so homophobic. And so yeah, it was powerful to like hear from those kids too. So, or they're adults now. But yeah. So that was really eye-opening.
So you were this punk rock kid who was a secret bookworm. Is it safe to say that books helped change your life?
Yeah, for sure. Big time. I mean, it was like cheap therapy, right? I mean,
Yeah.
I think before I was even aware of what therapy was, I was just like, I feel so terrible. And then I would, read the Scarlet Letter and I was like, I feel less terrible because Hester Prynne understands me.
Well, so here you go. Like, how does it feel to have written a book and come full circle, putting this book out there in the world that other people can identify with and not feel so alone?
Yeah, it feels great. I mean, it feels like, if I can get, I just thought like if even one person read this, like, it's sort of like playing a show, right? Like being in a band, playing a show, and you're like, man, if one person hears this song and like this somehow like helps them in any small way, like not in a grand way, like I don't, like I have no sort of like ego around it. Like it just feels really good. And that wasn't the intent, right? Like I don't think you can go into, like when you start a band, right? Like you don't start a band, you're like, we're gonna win Grammys. You're just like, I just want to play the best show I can play.
Yeah.
And whatever else happens, like that's a little bit out of my hands. So it's definitely like, again, I think it's like that punk rock thing of like keeping your ego in check a little bit. Which goes back to, I think, maybe the authenticity piece. Like I wonder if there's like an ego piece in there for me that's like triggering, like I think about like bands like Fugazi, like so authentic, right? And then I think about bands like, the Rolling Stones. I don't know, like I guess they're authentic in their their pursuit of of $800 ticket shows and stuff like that.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't know either.
So are you still teaching?
So I took a hiatus in 2019, in anticipation of like the book tour and stuff, which didn't happen. So now I'm sort of like, well, I don't want to go back to teaching in the middle of the pandemic. So I still definitely have gas in the tank, but I think for me, it's got to be sort of more sustainable, like for my family and stuff. And, frankly, I'd love a little bit more time to write. Like I've got a couple of writing projects in the works, so we'll see.
Yeah, I was going to ask. Like, I have a number of friends who are writers who have been trying to break down the door. How did they're writing short fiction that's in stuff getting published every week, and here you are, you just have this memoir out there. Like, what was the journey like getting this book made?
Yeah, I mean, so like in 2012, in 2012, I gave a TEDx talk.
It's a very nice one too.
Thank you. Thanks. And, it was the first time that I'd ever really talked about like my story in public. Like, prior to that, like I just never, ever talked about like growing up as a refugee and like, discovering punk rock and great books and all that stuff. And so like when I had the chance to give that talk, I just thought, you know what, I'm just going to go for it. Like, I'm not talking about all the shit I like. I'm going to talk about like language and grammar, Star Wars, John Hughes, punk rock. What's the worst that could happen? I'll do it all in 12 minutes, no problem. And the response to it was really, really powerful. And so I started doing like live storytelling gigs in Portland, like very similar to like the Moth, radio hour. So you have 7 minutes, get up on stage, tell a real story, and then get off, which I really sort of loved. And, every time I would do that, like people would be like, that was really great or whatever. And it felt really validating. And so I thought, at the time, this is like 2014 or 2015. I was like, oh, like when I'm like 70 and like I can't tattoo anymore and like my body is broken, like I'm totally gonna like write a book because it seems like people like the stories. And then in 2016, this agent from New York happened to see the TEDx talk. And so she just kind of cold called me and she was like, hey, like you seem like you have an interesting story. Would you consider writing a memoir? And I was like, eh, sure, why not? Let's give this a shot. So yeah.
You make it look easy, but I guess
Ugh,
it wasn't
thanks.
probably wasn't an easy experience getting there now.
No. I mean, writing is really lonely. That's the other thing that I really like. For me, I realize like tattooing for me is like so social, you know, like, and it's so interpersonal, and teaching is also so social. And like writing, it's just like you by yourself with your keyboard. Like you don't know if it's terrible. Like, you know, you're just, yeah, it's so it's hard. It's hard in a way that I didn't expect to be hard. Like I knew that like the writing, like the grind of writing would be challenging, but I didn't realize how like the isolation would also be like a thing to contend with. So yeah.
Interesting. So what do you have coming? Is there anything on the pipeline? What are you working on now? Like,
Yeah. I just finished two sort of short essays
Cool.
as contributions to like a larger anthology. So I was invited to contribute to two anthologies, which I don't want to say more about, like they're being shopped
Sure.
around now.
No, yeah.
Yeah. So those are out and in submission, and then I have a couple of like homework assignments for my agent. You know, we'll see. Like, you know, in some ways, excuse me, like you know, like I'm not writing for a paycheck necessarily.
Yeah.
I'm certainly not writing for like my own ego. I'm not writing for tenure. So I'm the most dangerous person to be writing a book right now because I can write whatever I want. But I don't want to waste anyone's time. Certainly not my reader's time.
That's
And
great.
yeah, and not my kids' time. You know, because I think like any hours that I'm logging in front of the laptop is time that you know, I'm not going to get back with them. So I just want to make sure that it's worthwhile. Yeah.
Yeah, that's great.
Thanks.
Tell me about the tattooing real quick before I let you go.
Yeah, sure. Yeah, what do you want to know?
You're pretty great at it. How did you get into tattooing? Like
Yeah,
you have
so
a more traditional, you know, Japanese, is that?
for sure, yeah, that's a lot of what I do. That's not, yeah, it's not the only thing I do, but I do definitely enjoy it. I was like getting, you know, I mean, growing up in part of the punk rock scene, like, you know, it's like you always wanted tattoos, but they're also really expensive, and so I didn't really get tattooed until I was in college. And I discovered the cash advance function on this credit card that my parents gave me. It was like the emergency credit card. And I was like, wait, I get free money off of this? You know? So
Oops.
that's when I started getting tattooed. Yeah. And then so I got tattooed through college, and then my last year of grad school, the guy that was tattooing me was like, you know, you seem like you're pretty into the lifestyle. This is like 1996, I think, you know, and he's like, well, you know, we're looking for an apprentice. You should apply to be an apprentice. And I was like, okay, you know, like sounds good. And so, yeah.
And this is while you're teaching too?
No, so it
Okay.
it was literally my last year of grad school.
Got it.
So I moved to New
Got it.
York City. Yeah. And the apprenticeship was unpaid. So I just taught during the day and then tattooed at night. And then I just kept doing that for like 20-ish years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Where are you working out of these days?
So my wife and I own a shop here in Portland, Maine. Yep. So Tsunami Tattoo,
That's cool.
that's our baby. From we left New York City and came here in 2003
Nice.
to, you know, do more adulting, you know, like have kids, buy a home, and
Open
open up a
tattoo shop.
business. Yeah, why not?
How are your books looking? Like if say somehow I was in Portland, Maine, and wanted a tattoo, what would be the best way to talk to you about it?
Yeah, I mean, definitely through like the website, like through the website's
Sure.
interface and stuff like that. I book about 9 months out in advance for tattooing. So, yeah, people
Yeah.
gotta plan a little bit, but you know, I appreciate anybody who is interested. You know, there's only one of me and a lot more of you guys out there. So
Cool. Yeah.
but I also have a great staff. So there's somebody at our shop that can certainly scratch your tattoo itch.
Well, I guess I'll just have to put one in for a year and a half from now, because who knows when this
Yeah,
when the
right.
world will get back to normal.
Yeah.
I read the book on the Libby app, the library app, through my local library, which, but I'm going to encourage people to buy a copy of the book because it's great.
Thanks.
I'm going to actually, are you still doing the autographed books?
Yeah. There's a link on my writer's website where you can order a signed copy.
Cool.
And so Yeah. So yeah.
I will put that in the links of wherever people are watching this, whether it be
Thanks a
YouTube
lot.
or whatnot. And then now that we've I just had this crazy idea. I didn't want to ask for an autographed copy without like having talked to you. And I was like, just sign whatever you want to now, because now we have like this hour-long rambling session.
Yeah, totally.
About something. But again, I love the book. Is there, before I let you go, enjoy the rest of your evening with your wife and kids, anything else you want to throw out there?
No, I mean, I think no, thanks. No, I just want to express my gratitude for anybody who's reading the book. I mean, it's really like you just have no idea like who's going to connect with it. So I'm so deeply grateful to each and every reader. So thank you, Damien, and thanks to your listeners.